My name is Marilyn Carter. I am 62 years old, and for most of my life I carried the title of wife with quiet pride. I believed in marriage, in partnership, in the steady rhythm of building a life with someone. But a single sentence spoken across the dinner table showed me just how invisible I had become. It was an ordinary evening, roast chicken on the table, our grown children gathered with their families. Conversation circled around travel and dreams. When it was my turn, I allowed myself to share something tender, something I had carried in my heart for decades. I spoke of Italy. I described the canals of Venice, the rolling hills of Tuscany, the art in Florence. My eyes lit up as I said, one day I would love for us to go together. My husband, Richard, leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Italy is not for the old. You would just slow me down." The words landed like stones. A polite ripple of laughter went around the table, but I felt my heart sink. I forced a smile, nodding as if I had taken the comment lightly, but later that night I locked the bathroom door and let the tears fall silently where no one could see. That moment was not just about Italy. It was about how he saw me, how the man I had spent 40 years beside no longer looked at me as a partner but as a burden. My hair had silvered, my knees sometimes ached, but my spirit still longed for adventure. Yet in his eyes, I had shrunk into the background of our living room, someone meant to keep the house tidy, meals cooked, and dreams small. I tell you this not just as a story about me, but as a reminder that words can wound deeply. When someone you love dismisses your worth, it can feel like the walls of your life are closing in. But sometimes those very words can also light a fire you did not know still burned inside you. That night, I did not know where this path would lead. All I knew was that something had shifted, and I would never hear the word Italy the same way again. When I look back now, I can see that the cracks had been there for years, small at first, then widening until they could no longer be ignored. In the early days of our marriage, Richard and I were a balance. He was fire, I was calm. He thrived on attention, the kind of man who could walk into a room and draw every eye. I was steady, the one who remembered birthdays, balanced the checkbook, and kept our home running smoothly. For a while it worked. I even admired his charm, the way he carried himself with such confidence. But time has a way of revealing what youth covers up. As the years went on, I found joy in small rituals, planting tulips every spring, hosting family dinners on Sundays, driving to see our grandchildren and bringing them little gifts I had tucked away. Richard, on the other hand, grew restless. He craved admiration, not intimacy. He wanted to be praised, noticed, admired by others, even strangers, in ways that no longer had anything to do with me. The distance grew slowly. First it was the late nights at the office, then the distracted conversations at home. He would come through the door carrying stress like a second briefcase, impatient with the smallest things. I would ask about his day, and he would sigh, already reaching for his phone. I felt myself fading into the wallpaper of our life, present but unseen. And then there was Ashley. She was his secretary, maybe 30 years younger than us, full of energy and laughter. I noticed how he lit up in her presence, how his voice softened when he spoke her name on the phone. I told myself it was harmless, that he needed someone to manage his busy schedule, but deep down, a knot of unease began to grow. Still, I smoothed it over the way I always had. I told myself, after all we had been through together, children, mortgages, illnesses, family crises, it had to mean something. But the truth was undeniable. The man who once held my hand during sleepless nights no longer reached for me. The one who once whispered dreams about our future now rolled his eyes when I spoke of mine. Those small cracks, the offhand comments, the distracted glances, they were all pieces of a puzzle I refused to see clearly. And yet clarity was coming, whether I was ready or not. The breaking point came on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that should have passed without notice. I was folding laundry in the kitchen, the hum of the dryer filling the silence, when Richard walked in with his usual briskness. He barely looked at me, muttering about deadlines and meetings, shuffling through his briefcase like always. Then, as casually as if he were mentioning a trip to the grocery store, he said, "I will be out of town for 2 weeks. Italy, meetings, do not wait up." Italy. The word struck me like a physical blow. My Italy, the dream I had carried quietly for decades, the one place I had begged him to go with me. And here he was, speaking of it with the same indifference as a train schedule. My hand froze on the dish towel. "Since when are you going to Italy?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. He waved a dismissive hand. "Work. You would not enjoy it. Too much walking, too much noise. You would get tired." He did not even attempt kindness. It was not about sparing me or protecting me. It was about removing me from the picture. That night, when he stepped out to take a call, I overheard it. His voice was not clipped or businesslike. It was smooth, warm, playful. And then I heard her name, Ashley, the confirmation I had been denying for months. He was not just going to Italy, he was going there with her. Oddly enough, I did not cry. Not this time. Instead, a stillness washed over me, as if the chaos inside had finally gone quiet. The anger was there, sharp and bitter, but beneath it pulsed something stronger. Clarity. For years, I had told myself stories about loyalty, about patience, about sacrifice. In that moment, all the illusions fell away. I saw the truth clearly for the first time. He had stolen my dream and handed it to someone else, and in doing so, he had also freed me from the prison of pretending. The following days felt surreal. I watched him through new eyes. The extra time spent at the gym, the careful grooming before work, the late night scrolling on his phone with that faint smile tugging at his lips. It all made sense now, but instead of spiraling into despair, I felt a new kind of focus. I began to whisper to myself, "You are not powerless. You are not done." That phrase became my anchor. I did not yet know exactly what I would do, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When Richard returned from Italy, he would not come home to the same woman he had left behind. He thought Italy would be his triumph. He did not realize it would become the birthplace of mine. The night after I overheard that call, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pen. For decades I had made lists of groceries, chores, errands. But this list was different. This one was about power. I wrote down everything Richard and I owned, everything he valued, everything he assumed was untouchable. His car, our joint bank accounts, the house deed, the pension we had both contributed to for years. For so long I had treated those things as ours. That night I decided to see them as rightfully mine. The first item on my list was his car. That car was not just transportation to him. It was his pride, his proof that he was still young, still desirable, still important. He spent weekends polishing it, bragging about it to friends, treating it like a trophy. To me, it was the perfect place to start. I contacted a local dealer I trusted, a man I had met years ago through a neighbor. He came by within 2 days, inspected the car, and named a fair price. I did not haggle. I simply handed him the keys, signed the papers, and stood at the window as the car disappeared down the street. My knees trembled for a moment, but then a wave of freedom washed over me. The chains had begun to break. Next on my list were the accounts. Richard had always assumed I would never touch the money. He believed I was too timid, too dependent, too blind. But every dollar in those accounts represented years of my labor meals cooked, children raised, a home managed, his career supported. That money was as much mine as his. So I walked into the bank one morning dressed in a simple cardigan, carrying my tote bag like I was on any other errand. The young teller smiled politely, asked if I wanted to make a withdrawal. "Yes," I said firmly. "All of it." She blinked, surprised. "All of it," I repeated. When I walked out of that bank, a cashier's check tucked safely in my bag, I felt taller than I had in years. The money was no longer waiting to be spent on champagne in Rome. It was back in my hands. The last step was the lawyer. I made the appointment quietly, telling Richard the first was going to the grocery store. The woman I met across that polished desk was sharp-eyed, calm and steady, perhaps a few years younger than me. I poured out everything, the belittling comments, the dream of Italy, the secretary, the car, the accounts. She listened without judgment, then leaned forward and said, "You have already done the hardest part, Marilyn. You decided you are done. The rest is just paperwork." Hearing those words was like taking my first deep breath in years. For so long, marriage had felt like an unmovable wall. That day I realized I had already begun to dismantle it, brick by brick. Divorce. A word I once feared now tasted like liberation. And while Richard wandered cobblestone streets with Ashley, I was building a future of my own, one deliberate choice at a time. Once the papers were filed and the money secured, I could have spent those weeks brooding, waiting for Richard to return from his grand adventure. But something inside me had shifted. Instead of shrinking into the silence, I began to stretch. I asked myself, if I no longer exist just to keep him satisfied, then who am I? The answer came slowly, in small, unexpected ways. The first step was painting. I had always admired art, clipping pictures from magazines of landscapes and still lifes, but I had never dared to pick up a brush. Richard used to scoff when I mentioned it. Too messy, too impractical, he would say. But now there was nothing stopping me. I signed up for a painting class at the community center. On the first day, I stood before the blank canvas with trembling hands, certain I would make a fool of myself. But when I let the colors spill across the canvas, something lit up inside me. The teacher, a cheerful man with paint on his shoes, looked over my shoulder and said, "You have an eye for this." Those simple words landed in a place that had been starved for years. Not praise for how I looked, not thanks for what I did for others, but recognition for something that belonged to me alone. Then came friendship. A few women I knew from church invited me on a day trip to a coastal town 2 hours away. I almost declined out of habit, worried about the time, the cost, the responsibility of being home. But then I realized there was nothing to hold me back anymore, so I went. We wandered the boardwalk, ate fried clams, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. For the first time in decades, I was not glancing at the clock, wondering what kind of mood Richard would be in when I got home. I was free to enjoy the moment. Even the garden took on new life. That little patch of earth behind our house became my Tuscany. I dug my hands into the soil, planting tomatoes, basil, and lavender. Each sprout that pushed through the dirt felt like a declaration. Growth is always possible, no matter the season. While Richard chased sunsets in Rome, I was learning to create beauty in my own backyard. It turned out freedom did not need a passport. It needed only the courage to claim it. The day Richard returned felt like the final act of a long play. I had rehearsed it in my mind so many times that when it finally came, there was no nervousness left in me, only a calm certainty. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, the taxi pulling up. The front door swung open, and there he was, tanned from the Mediterranean sun, suitcase in hand, smelling faintly of cologne I did not recognize. He had the swagger of a man convinced he had fooled everyone, certain he was stepping back into a life preserved, just as he left it. "Well," he said with a grin, dropping his bags in the hallway. "Home sweet home." I studied him quietly, taking in the arrogance on his face. Then his eyes flicked toward the driveway, and confusion crossed his expression. "Where's the car?" he asked sharply. "Sold," I said, my voice calm as stone. His head snapped toward me. "You what?" "I sold it," I repeated, folding my hands on the table. "It is gone." His face reddened. "That car was worth it was worth exactly what I got for it," I interrupted, steady and unwavering. "And that money is mine now, just like the accounts, just like my time, just like my future." He froze. The color drained from his face as he processed my words. "The accounts? All of them?" "Every last dollar," I answered, withdrawn and secured. "You will not be buying champagne in Rome with that money anymore?" For a long moment he just stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Fury and disbelief battled on his face. He slammed his suitcase shut and straightened up, as if trying to reclaim control. "You cannot do this. I will not allow it." That was the moment I laughed, not cruelly but freely, like someone who had finally stepped out of a cage. "You will not allow it." "That is the problem right there, Richard. You spent decades believing I needed your permission. But I do not. Not anymore. The papers are filed. The lawyers are handling it. You no longer get to allow or forbid anything in my life." He staggered back, stunned. His voice dropped to a low growl. "You ungrateful, bitter stop," I cut in, raising a hand. My voice did not shake. "For years I swallowed your insults, your dismissive remarks, your endless belittling. I let you shrink me down until I barely recognized myself. But I am done. I am not too old. I am not too weak. I am not too small. I am done." Silence filled the room. For the first time in our marriage, I had the last word. He grabbed his suitcase, stormed toward the door, and spat, "You will be nothing without me." I stood tall, my hands steady. "On the contrary," I said softly, "without you I am finally something." After he left, the house felt different. It was quieter, yes, but the quiet was not empty. It was space to breathe, to think, to choose. I had wanted him to feel the consequence of his choices, but I did not want revenge to be my ending. What I wanted was life rebuilt on my terms. I started with small things. I rearranged the living room, placing the photographs I had always tucked away on the mantel. I lit the lavender candles he used to complain about and left the music on when I cooked. It was the tiny rebellions that mattered because each one was a step toward saying, "This home belongs to me now." More importantly, I returned to people I had put on the shelf. My sister came for long afternoons of iced tea and conversation. Old friends invited me out without the obligation of performance, no pretending, no tiptoeing around a mood. Those lunches and slow walks reminded me of a life that existed long before the marriage shaped me into its silhouette. I also kept painting. The canvases stacked in the corner began to tell a new story: color, bold strokes, a woman who trusted her own eye. The first gallery that agreed to hang one of my pieces was a tiny place downtown with a woman owner who believed in second acts. When a neighbor stopped by and said, "You look different," she smiled like someone who had been given back a friend. That small recognition felt like sunlight. Travel came later, and when it did, it was gentle. I took a short trip to a bed and breakfast upstate, the kind of weekend that is quiet and restorative. I walked trails, wrote in a journal, and ate breakfast on a porch that overlooked trees. I went not to prove anything to anyone, but because I finally could choose for myself. My garden flourished. The tomatoes and basil I planted became more than food, they were evidence. Growth after hardship is not dramatic. It is steady, tender, and persistent. That is how I wanted my life to be. The point is not that he failed, or that I taught him a lesson. The point is that I remembered who I was when no one else was watching. I did not become bitter, I became awake, and waking up felt like a gift I had earned. If you have listened this far, thank you. My story is not unique in its pain, but it is chosen in its response. I could have spent years waiting, shrinking, trying to make someone else see me. Instead, I chose to stand. I sold what no longer served me, reclaimed my resources, and used them to build a life that honors who I am. If there is one honest piece of advice I would give you, it is this: your worth is not determined by someone else's need for you. Age is not a sentence, it is permission to finally live for yourself. Small acts add up. Quiet choices change things. You do not need drama to reclaim a life, you need resolve. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Leave a comment to tell me where you are watching from. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Like the video if you believe it is never too late to choose yourself, and share it with a friend who might need to hear that message today. Thank you for being here. Remember, it is never too late to begin again.